Chinese President Xi Jinping has kick-started his week-long diplomatic blitz of South America as he opens a $1.3 billion megaport on the sidelines of the APEC summit.
China just made a move that could reshape global trade, and it's happening in America's backyard. This is more than just a port. It's a power play that could change the balance of power between the U.S. and China forever. But why did the U.S. let this happen, and how do they plan to stop it? The Chancay Port project in Peru, inaugurated on November 14, 2024, represents a major Chinese-led infrastructure development in South America. Located approximately 78 kilometers north of Lima, it is funded by China's COSCO Shipping and Peruvian private entities. The $3.6 billion project is a part of China's Belt and Road Initiative. It is South America's first Chinese-funded port, and is poised to be a transformative hub for trade between Asia and South America. The port is expected to generate annual revenues of $4.5 billion, equivalent to 1.7% of Peru's GDP, and create over 8,000 direct and indirect jobs. It aims to significantly reduce shipping times and costs between Peru and China, cutting sea freight duration to 23 days, and lowering logistics costs by more than 20%. Chancay is designed to streamline trade routes across the Pacific, enhancing connectivity for exports such as copper and lithium from Peru and Chile, and imports of Asian goods like electronics and textiles. It also strengthens China's influence in Latin America by bypassing traditional U.S.-linked trade hubs. This last point is where it really gets interesting. However, before we address that, it is important to note that while the project has created jobs and improved local economic conditions, it has also sparked concerns about environmental degradation and the disruption of traditional fishing activities in the region. The construction caused significant damage to local homes and the environment, as residents reported cracks in their houses, flooding, and other structural issues due to vibrations and construction activities. While China has prioritized trade and infrastructure in Latin America, the United States' regional focus has been primarily on issues like migration, equality, and drug interdiction. This divergence in priorities has allowed China to deepen its influence through initiatives such as the Chancay Port. A U.S. official downplayed the strategic implications, suggesting that diverse trade partnerships in Latin America are natural. However, critics argue this laissez-faire approach has diminished U.S. leadership in the region. Due to this relaxation by the U.S., Peru has strengthened its economic and diplomatic relationship with China in recent years.
To foster the trade with China, right now China is our main trading partner. It has surpassed the U.S. in recent years.
With limited U.S. investments in comparable large-scale infrastructure projects, China has filled the gap, offering not just financing but also technical expertise. The U.S. has expressed concerns about the geopolitical implications of the project, particularly regarding potential Chinese control over a critical infrastructure asset in the Pacific. However, it has yet to match China's level of engagement and financial commitment in Peru. Hence, their concerns are falling on deaf ears. The U.S.'s limited leverage stems from Peru's sovereign decision-making and the lack of alternative offers to rival China's investment. The U.S. could not provide a comparable infrastructure development plan, leaving Peru little incentive to reconsider its partnership with China. Additionally, while U.S. officials have raised concerns about transparency and potential over-reliance on China, such warnings have not outweighed the tangible benefits Peru expects from the port. Former President Donald Trump's policies, including imposing tariffs on Chinese goods and renegotiating trade deals in the Americas, potentially strained U.S.-China relations, but did little to counter China's inroads in Latin America. Conversely, the Biden administration has only made minimal efforts to re-engage with the region, with President Biden visiting South America just once during his tenure. In contrast, Chinese President Xi Jinping has frequently toured Latin America, attending summits and inaugurating projects like Chancay. Analysts highlight that China's strategic investments in projects like Chancay and a possible railway line to Brazil demonstrate a deliberate effort to gain leverage in Latin America, a region traditionally within the U.S. sphere of influence. This trend could reshape trade dynamics, with Latin America becoming more integrated with Asia at the expense of traditional U.S. economic dominance. The lack of U.S. infrastructure investments is seen by some as a missed opportunity to counter China's growing clout. Basically, the U.S. has left a vacuum, and China has filled it rapidly. But is it already too late for the United States? Well, not exactly. Donald Trump's election victory was built on promises of imposing steeper import taxes, with proposed tariffs of up to 60% on Chinese-made goods. This tough stance on trade significantly strained relations between the U.S. and China and threatened Beijing's ambitions to become a global technology leader. An advisor to Trump's transition team, Mauricio Claver Caroni, was quoted as saying, "Any product going through Shanxi or any Chinese-owned or controlled port in the region should be subject to 60% tariff as if the product was from China."
Since the Obama administration eased restrictions on travel and remittances, on purposeful quote-unquote travel and remittances in April 2009,
during his first term, Trump implemented tariffs of up to 25% on Chinese products, and analysts like Bill Bishop believe his rhetoric about new tariffs should be taken seriously, as Trump blames China and COVID-19 for his 2020 election loss. But even after Trump left office in 2021, U.S. pressure on China continued under President Joe Biden, who maintained and expanded many of Trump's trade measures. While these actions initially caused economic pain for China, the country now faces greater vulnerabilities due to a post-pandemic economic slowdown. Factors such as a property market slump, rising government debt, and high unemployment have dampened growth, with the IMF projecting China's GDP to grow by just 4.8% in 2024, declining further to 4.5% in 2025. Efforts to stabilize the economy include an $840 billion plan to bail out indebted local governments, but challenges remain. According to the U.S., the tariffs are aimed at deterring transshipment, a process where goods are routed through third-party countries to avoid tariffs. The new policy could discourage countries from allowing Chinese infrastructure investments, which the U.S. views as a geopolitical challenge. Claver Carone described the proposed measure as a shot across the bow to countries partnering with China on maritime infrastructure. He cited Mexico's ports as an example, where transshipment concerns have grown due to the rise in U.S.-Mexico trade following Trump's initial trade war with China. China's growing influence in Latin America, including the Shanxi port, reflects broader U.S.-China tensions. The U.S. is concerned that such projects expand Beijing's economic and strategic footprint, potentially threatening American interests in the region. While China promotes the port as a South American-Asia trade corridor, U.S. policymakers view it as part of China's broader ambition to dominate global trade routes. However, China's leaders are also not backing down. In fact, they expected this. They anticipated a slowdown in its rapid economic growth and have emphasized a transition to high-quality development, led by advanced manufacturing and green industries. The country has achieved dominance in key sectors such as solar panels, electric vehicles, and lithium-ion batteries. Exports in these areas surged by 30% in 2023, surpassing $139 billion and mitigating some of the economic impacts of its property crisis. However, rising resistance from Western countries, including the U.S. and EU, poses new obstacles. For instance, the EU recently imposed tariffs of up to 45% on Chinese electric vehicles. As Trump appears poised to return to the White House with plans to reintroduce aggressive trade policies,
we believe that trade must be fair and reciprocal. The United States will not be taken advantage of.
China faces the dual challenge of boosting domestic consumption and navigating growing resistance to its exports. But aside from China's threat at global economic dominance, there is also another thing that scares the U.S. The Shanxi port in Peru has raised significant military and strategic concerns, particularly regarding its potential as a dual-use facility. Analysts point out that Chinese-controlled ports worldwide have demonstrated dual-use capabilities, serving both commercial and military purposes. These concerns stem from China's ability to use such ports as logistical hubs for its navy, particularly the People's Liberation Army Navy or PLAN, and as tools for gathering data on trade flows, which could be leveraged for economic or strategic coercion. According to the outgoing commander of the United States Southern Command General Laura Richardson, the deep-water capabilities of the Chancay port could potentially support Chinese warships, allowing for port calls and logistical resupply. Similar dual-use patterns have been observed in other Chinese-operated ports globally. Chancay's location on the Pacific coast of South America positions it to play a key role in the region's maritime infrastructure. This proximity could allow China to enhance its naval reach in the Western Hemisphere. After all, their ports in the Caribbean Sea and the Panama Canal currently serve these purposes that the U.S. dreads. In a nutshell, the U.S. worries that China is basically setting that port to spy on the naval and commercial ships of the United States. But it seems we are talking too much about China and the U.S. without considering the Latin American countries like Peru, where these struggles are occurring. So what is the position of Latin America? Latin American countries are increasingly navigating a complex geopolitical landscape as U.S.-China competition intensifies in the region. Many nations aim to remain neutral, avoiding a definitive alignment with either Washington or Beijing unless circumstances force their hand. This balancing act reflects a pragmatic approach to maximizing economic opportunities while minimizing potential risks. Latin American leaders recognize that their economic well-being depends on maintaining strong ties with both the U.S. and China. Countries in the region have long-standing trade agreements and security partnerships with the U.S., but China's rising influence offers lucrative infrastructure investments and access to its vast consumer markets. This dual reliance makes choosing sides a high-stakes decision many governments would prefer to avoid. But what if we decide to put side by side the benefits provided by China and the U.S. to Latin America? Who do you think contributes the most to this Latino region? The United States remains Latin America's most significant trading partner, supported by long-standing trade agreements such as NAFTA, USMCA with Mexico, and CAFTA-DR with Central America and the Caribbean. Bilateral agreements like the U.S.-Peru Trade Promotion Agreement have deepened economic ties between the two regions. For example, trade between Peru and the U.S. exceeded $22 billion in 2022. Additionally, the U.S. provides substantial aid, technical assistance, and capacity-building efforts in key areas like counter-narcotics and disaster response, reinforcing its influence across the region. But China, however, has emerged as a major competitor, largely through its Belt and Road Initiative, which has poured billions into Latin American infrastructure projects. These investments span ports, railways, and energy facilities. China has also become the largest trading partner for key countries like Brazil, Chile, and Peru, primarily due to its demand for commodities such as soybeans, copper, and lithium. Infrastructure projects like the Chancay port in Peru are designed to establish direct trade routes to Asia, reducing shipping costs and enhancing regional competitiveness. Chinese investments have rapidly accelerated infrastructure growth across Latin America. Projects like the Chancay port aim to create more efficient trade routes to Asia, boosting export potential and driving regional economic growth. Moreover, these partnerships enable Latin American nations to diversify their trade and investment sources, reducing their dependence on the U.S. and increasing their leverage in global markets. However, despite these opportunities, there are significant risks associated with China's growing influence. Critics argue that Chinese loans for large-scale projects often come with high interest rates and a lack of transparency, creating the possibility of unsustainable debt. Countries such as Ecuador and Venezuela have already faced challenges in repaying Chinese loans, raising concerns about financial sovereignty. Dependence on Chinese financing could also limit Latin America's ability to act independently on foreign policy matters. Additionally, closer ties with Beijing may provoke a geopolitical backlash from Washington, which remains wary of China's expanding role in the region. The U.S. could respond with measures like trade penalties, reduced foreign aid, or increased diplomatic pressure, potentially complicating Latin America's balancing act between the two powers. The competition between the United States and China in Latin America is escalating, with both powers vying for influence through trade, investment, and strategic initiatives. While the U.S. has traditionally held a dominant position in the region, underpinned by long-standing agreements such as NAFTA, USMCA, and CAFTA-DR, China's aggressive investments under the Belt and Road Initiative are reshaping the landscape. For countries like Peru, Brazil, and Chile, which export commodities such as soybeans, copper, and lithium, China has become a crucial trading partner. Projects like Peru's Chancay port promise faster trade routes to Asia, offering significant economic incentives, but also sparking geopolitical tensions. The U.S. is increasingly responding to China's advances, with figures like Donald Trump advocating steep tariffs on goods routed through Chinese-controlled ports, such as Chancay. However, inconsistent U.S. policies and limited infrastructure investments have left some countries open to Beijing's financial and developmental support. This creates opportunities for Latin America to diversify its partnerships and reduce dependence on the U.S., but raises concerns over risks such as unsustainable debt, over-reliance on Chinese financing, and potential loss of sovereignty. For instance, countries like Ecuador and Venezuela have faced challenges in repaying Chinese loans, highlighting the dangers of such dependency. The growing competition places Latin America in a delicate position. Nations are striving to maintain neutrality, seeking to benefit economically from both powers without alienating either. However, a prolonged U.S.-China trade war could force the region into difficult choices, particularly if Washington pressures governments to distance themselves from Beijing. As China's investments accelerate infrastructure development and reshape global trade routes, the U.S. will need to significantly enhance its engagement in the region to prevent losing ground. Latin American leaders, meanwhile, must navigate these dynamics carefully, balancing opportunities for growth with the risks of geopolitical entanglement. The battle for Latin America is just beginning, and its outcome will shape the future of global power. Do you think Latin America should align with China or the U.S., or forge its own path? Let us know in the comments.